So hello and welcome to week 4 of Crack the Code, how to unlock the true potential in your leadership. So again, really excited to be back with you this evening to take you through the next part of our program. So this week we are going to be exploring the number one priority that you have. So just to remind people how this works, as I've mentioned to you before, it's really important that we have our preparation. So what do I want to get from this session? So hopefully you've been thinking into our last lesson, which was 2 weeks ago. Hopefully you've been thinking into that lesson and really thinking about how I've applied that, so you can then start looking at how do I then consider what my next steps are in terms of advancing my own leadership potential. And I'm hoping that you come to this session ready to think into what are my priorities and where do I need to focus my energies. So once again, I'll be taking you through a short lesson this evening, and then there'll be opportunities for you to respond with some questions on the back of that. We've had some great questions coming in, and I'll be looking to explore those later on. But like all of our sessions, what I'm encouraging you to do is, as you listen into this session, to be considering what do I need to take action on? How can I change and develop my learning capability and my leadership capability by taking one thing that I'm going to go and apply back into my own leadership practice? So again, as we're going through tonight's lesson, where are you going to focus your energy, and what are you taking away that you're going to go and apply back into your own leadership? My journey so far. So week 1, we looked at paint the picture, and we focused on how we can be intentional as leaders and consider where are we purposely and intentionally placing our energy in order to become effective. We asked you to really tune into some of the deeper questions, and hopefully you've had some time to think about those questions as you've explored the your own kind of reflections on the back of that first week's lesson. Week 2, we asked you to lose the cape, and we talked about superhero leadership, and we also talked into the dangers of superhero leadership and how when we have this desire to need to know things, we potentially are holding back our team and also our organization. So again, hopefully post our week 2 lesson, you've been spending less time in the saving the day mode and the crisis mode, and more time invested in developing the capability of your team so you don't need to save the day. And then our last session, just because you can doesn't mean you should, we focused on where we were applying our energy, and again, drawing on the lesson from week 2, we built on that in terms of were we operating at the visions level, were we operating at strategy level, or were we operating at a tactical level? And how are we influencing the culture of our organizations to enable us to have high-performing teams? So far, we've really tapped into you as a leader and where you see yourself, and we've started to look at how you're influencing those around you. And we're going to build on this theme of how do we influence those around us in today's session, and I'm really going to ask you to focus on your number one priority. Now, for those of you who have been in my community for a while, you will know that I'm absolutely passionate about this concept that your number one priority is to help your team become brilliant. So as leaders and managers, our role is not to do the doing. Our role is to influence and help our teams become better, help them to become brilliant as a team, and help them individually as human beings to become stronger and better humans. I've said before, again, in my community, we don't lead roles, we lead people. And therefore, our number one priority as a leader is to help the people we lead to become better. We need to be adding value to the people who are in our teams. One of our guiding principles needs to be, if somebody joins my team, for however long they stay in that team, I want them to end up being better when they leave that team at whatever point. So in the time that they are working with me, I need to be adding value to them as individuals, not because they will produce more for me in the workplace, although they will, but because my genuine intention is to help my team become better and help those individuals grow as human beings and become or fulfill the potential that they have. Now, of course, we have lots of other pressures on us and we have lots of other demands on our time. And we talked about this as part of our webinar in lesson 3. But we have to find the time within our busy schedules and prioritize helping our teams to grow. So what I'm going to take you through in the next 25 minutes or so is to really think into what are the techniques and tactics that I can use that will enable me to grow the people around me to help them become brilliant. And in doing so, I can then increase the performance and the productivity of my team, increase the outputs, increase the results, and really move my own performance, the performance of my team, performance of my organization to the next level, but through the people I lead rather than me having to be the person who is delivering at a higher level. And by working on making our teams become brilliant, you will naturally start to work on increasing your own capability and capacity to lead through. So that's what our number one priority needs to be. And what we're going to talk about now is how do we go about creating that brilliance in others, and how do we really focus on prioritizing our team as our number one priority. So if we think about creating brilliance, I love to think about what is that process that creates brilliance. And the best way for us to think about that is to use the metaphor of a diamond. Now, we all know that a beautiful, brilliant cut diamond shines with an inner fire and has the most amazing radiance. And it particularly responds well to when light is bouncing off it. It refracts that light into a multitude of different ways, and it shines with this inner fire and this inner brilliance, which is where the name of the cut comes from, this brilliant cut diamond. So it radiates light. However, when diamonds come out of the earth, they are not in this brilliant perfection shape that we know when we see them in a jewelry shop, or we see them in a ring, or we see them on a piece of jewelry. They don't come out of the earth that way. They take lots of time and energy and lots of process for them to form into that radiant stone that we know and love. So when a diamond is mined, it is first found embedded in the rock and carbon deposits from where it originates. So diamonds are carbon deposits that have become crushed over time through pressure to form into this hard stone. But when we find them and when we mine them, they're still locked within the rocky confines of which they've been formed from. So one of the first stages we need to do with any diamond when we find them is to knock off those rocky edges, to release it from the bonds of that place where they were born from, to enable us to then start to work on bringing their radiance to life. So once we found this diamond, once we've spotted this radiant diamond, we need to release it from the rocks that encase it. Then we need to start shaping the diamond, and we cut into the facets of the diamond so we can shape it into this brilliant shape that we know and love. And we shape it so that the natural radiance of the diamond can come forth. So when the light hits this diamond, because of the facets that have been cut into it, the shaping that's taken place, that's what creates this amazing radiance that happens within the diamond itself. But this shaping of the diamond requires a lot of abrasion. You can't shape a diamond by using a very smooth force to it. It has to have some amount of abrasion. And the craftspeople who really shape diamonds and bring out their natural brilliance, they know just enough level of abrasion, just enough force that enables them to shape the diamond and cut in the facets that are required to bring out its natural brilliance, but not overdoing it so it doesn't dull the surface and it doesn't diminish the diamond. And it still keeps that inner core and strength of the diamond without overly damaging it. And then once it's been shaped and we can see the facets and we've got the perfect shaping of that diamond that we know and love, The final stage is for those facets and those surfaces to be polished to a highly polished surface, which allows the light to freely flow through and to freely flow out of it. And this polishing that happens is the final stage to really release the brilliance that exists within the diamond that we know. And that's what the brilliant cut diamond is famous for. It's got the perfect cut and it's been highly polished to allow this light to shine through it and radiate from it. So if we take this metaphor and apply it to our teams, many of our teams, when we discover the diamonds, so through our recruitment process, we're looking to spot those potential diamonds of the future. So we go mining for our diamonds. But when we find one that has potential, the first thing we have to do with many of those individuals is to free them from some of the baggage that is stopping them from being as brilliant as they can be. Maybe to free them from some of the limiting beliefs that are holding them back from being as brilliant as they could be, or for fulfilling that potential that we've seen in them. So many of the people that we have within our teams will come with, whether they are limiting beliefs that have been driven from their child, and we talked about that as part of our first webinar when we talked about motivation, or whether it's based on experiences they've had in a previous job. So they come to us not necessarily fresh, but they come to us with experience and maybe some baggage from previous works that they've done. So a big part of our first stage in terms of creating brilliance in our teams is to free them from some of those limiting beliefs and to really tune into what's going on in their mental processes to enable us to focus on how do we help them to move forward from there. So releasing them from the rocks that they were encased in the first place. Once we've created the right mental framework for them to perform at their best, and once we've managed to challenge some of those limiting beliefs, then it's our job to try and shape those individuals. And this is where, as leaders and managers, we need to invest time and energy, and also invest the right type of time and energy in shaping those diamonds into the fully formed, radiant beings that we want them to be performing at their very best within our teams. And just like where a diamond is cut into the shape that's needed, oftentimes it's going to require from us some gentle nurturing of our teams, but it also requires some abrasion. So as leaders and managers, we have a responsibility to help the people know when they're doing things well and shape their behaviors towards the positive, but also to give them feedback when they're not doing things quite so well, when we need to knock off the rough edges that they have. And as leaders and managers, we are doing them a service by helping them to understand when they are performing at a high level, but also to help them to understand when things aren't going quite so well. So we need to have a certain amount of abrasion. And the challenge for us as leaders is to know how much abrasion is needed with each individual to bring that shining light that we know exists within them to the fore. Some people need are what we might class as a real hard diamond, and they might need more abrasion, and they might need more shaping to bring them out. And some of them may be already in a great shape, and we just need to have a gentle level of abrasion just to fine-tune some of those edges. And then once we've got them into the shape that we need, and we've shaped their thinking, we've shaped their actions and their behaviors, it's then when we have to apply those polish to them, the finishing touches that really helps the people shine. And when you've got your particular stars in your team, some of your brighter diamonds, some of the people who are further along the path towards becoming the finished article, really that's when we invest our time and energy as leaders and managers in polishing off and finishing off those skills, refining it to the nth degree to make sure that those individuals have the confidence and the ability to shine forth. So a lot of the time we will be spending and investing time, we should be investing time in helping our people recognize and just polishing those surfaces to bring them to that full luster. So when you think about your own team and you think about the diamonds that you have within your team, because there will be many, what stage of the shaping process are they? How radiant are they being? and how are you applying your leadership techniques and tactics towards bringing out the light from those diamonds. So if we keep that metaphor in our mind, how much are we as leaders adding to the light that comes from these people? Or are by our actions and our behaviors, are we dimming their light because we're either being overly abrasive, or we aren't spending time shaping them, or we're not spending time polishing them to become as good as they can be? If we're only focusing on our tasks, then our little diamonds are being left to one side and we're not seeing the full light from those diamonds. If we're only focused on wearing the cape ourselves and fixing everything, then again, we will be not applying ourselves to really bringing out the radiance from the diamonds we have in our team. And as leaders, we have to believe that all of the people within our team have the capacity to shine. And our job is to bring that radiance forth. So this comment on this slide is a really quite a powerful comment, but something we need to accept, because it's the only way that we ever step forward into growth as a leader. The quality of your team is a direct reflection of your leadership. Now, for anybody who's been leading their team for 6 months or longer, the performance of that team is a direct reflection of your leadership performance. So if your team is not quite where it needs to be, you need to start first by looking at what are you doing to help contribute towards their performance. Are you helping to shape them by giving them clarity around what's needed? I'm going to talk about that in a while. Are you helping them with feedback and providing the right level of abrasion to knock off the difficult edges of poor performance to enable them to shine? But we need to be really clear on our role and our remit within leading our teams. It's very, very easy for us to look to the team members themselves and point the finger of blame at them and say they're not performing to a standard that's high enough. But are we performing at a standard that's high enough in terms of the way that we're leading them? Are we investing enough time and energy in helping those people to advance and grow? Or are we focusing our energy on other things? So your team will always be a reflection of your leadership. And as I mentioned, after 6 months, that should give you enough time to start shaping the performance that you require from your team. If you're not quite up to 6 months with the team that you lead currently, then you should be well on your way to starting to shape that diamonds into the way that you want them to be seen. So again, check in with yourself to see, am I performing at my best to get the best out of the team that I lead? So if you think about creating brilliance, the first stage in helping our people to be brilliant is to create clarity for them. Creating clarity is not just about setting objectives and targets. That is a part of what we need to do. We need to set them goals and have them things to go after. But setting clarity is being really clear on what our expectations are of them in terms of the way we want them to behave, the way we want them to act, the way we want them to interact, the way that we want to work together as a team, and what it means to act in a brilliant way. Being clear over your expectation is critical for people to know what they are trying to create. What we have to do is try and give our team members a really clear mental model of what it means to perform at a high standard. So if you can imagine trying to do a jigsaw puzzle and you don't have a picture of the, normally on a big jigsaw puzzle, you've got the box cover that tells you what the final jigsaw is supposed to represent. But imagine having a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle laid in front of you and you don't have any idea of what the picture is. Now, you might get there. You might, through persistence and dedication, you might manage to recreate that image. But it's going to be massively frustrating, and it's going to take you a lot longer to complete the jigsaw puzzle than if you had a clear picture of what you're trying to create in front of you. And it's exactly the same for our teams. We need to create a really clear mental image for our teams of what great looks like. Because if I've got a really clear picture of what I'm expected to achieve and what great and brilliance looks like, then I've got a much better chance of achieving it. A lot of the time when we are talking about our expectations to our team, we typically use the negative emphasis. So we focus rather on what we don't want rather than what we do want. Very common for leaders and managers to describe what they're not happy with and to pick people up on for what things are wrong, rather than actually to focus on the things that are positive and are good, and to paint the picture of what you do want. So when we are shaping and giving clarity to our teams, it's really important that we focus on, this is how I want you to perform. This is what great looks like. When I want you to do this task, this is what good will look like when you achieve this task. When you are in a client meeting, this is what good looks like when it comes to showing up and being in a client meeting. When you are problem solving, this is what good looks like when it comes to problem solving. So our key focus is to not talk about what we don't want, but to focus on what we do want. Our brains actually do not have the capability. Our brains don't process the word don't. So if I was to say to you now, don't think of an elephant, the first thing you're going to do is think of an elephant, because our brains will just hear the word at the end and they miss out the don't part. So the moment when we start to communicate to our teams in the negative sense, when we tell them what we don't want, all we're doing is channeling their energy to the things that we do not want to happen. Whereas when we focus our energy on what we do want, when we communicate to people in terms of real clarity around what it is that we expect from them and what great looks like, they're focusing their energies on that great performance. And once they've created that mental model, it's much easier to replicate, just like doing the jigsaw puzzle. And once we've created those expectations, the next thing we need to focus on is the quality of the feedback that we give. Now, feedback is a critical skill for leaders to develop. And if we're going to improve, we need to have feedback. Just as Bill Gates on the quote here, we all need people who will give us feedback. That's how we improve. You have an obligation to your team members to help them to improve by giving them really clear and honest feedback. Now, you'll notice that I'm not talking about positive or critical feedback, because actually it doesn't matter. What really matters is that we give people effective feedback that helps them to understand what they've done and how they can improve. And when it comes to motivating and leading our teams and creating an environment of high performance, praise is important. Praise is critical. We need to give people praise. But also, giving people effective feedback that helps them to improve is just as important as praise. And when we look out to recognize people and we want to find people doing, we use the phrase, catch people doing the right thing. Absolutely. We need to go out with the intention that we're going to spot the right thing so people can replicate it. But we need to give them effective feedback, not just saying you're doing a great job, but what are you doing that's great? How are you doing a great job? What are the impacts that great job has? And what do you want me to replicate going forward? And equally, when things aren't quite so right, that's where we need to be slightly more abrasive. And that's the point where we need to smooth off those edges by giving them really clear, effective feedback as to what it is that they're not doing to the standards. But when we're doing that, we need to go back to our previous point of, this is not what I'm looking for, but this is what I'm looking for. This is the standard that I'm trying to achieve, or I need you to get to, and make that really clear for people. So we all need feedback. Feedback motivates us to keep going. None of us will operate in a vacuum. If we are operating a team where we do not give regular and consistent feedback, it will not be surprising that people will stop doing what they need to do. Now, just imagine that you have a passion for cooking, for instance. Anybody I know who has a passion for cooking, who really loves cooking, the reason they love cooking primarily is they love to serve others the food that they prepared. And most people, no matter how much they love cooking, when they're cooking for themselves, tend to go towards the bottom end of their skill capability, because actually, if nobody's going to appreciate it apart from me, why would I push myself to do that standard? And they certainly don't do the presentation that you would expect if they were preparing it for somebody else, because we all crave that feedback. The reason why we love cooking is we love the appreciation that somebody shows for the thing that we've created. Artists love to create artworks, but part of the pleasure of creating the artwork is the satisfaction of the feedback that I get from people who see the artwork. or the feedback that I get through my own eyes of looking back when I've completed a piece of artwork and I can see the satisfaction in the shape that I've created. But we all require some kind of feedback, and it helps us to keep going. It gives us that drive to want to keep pushing. So if you are creating a vacuum in your teams because you're not giving enough feedback, then don't be surprised that people stop striving to become better. So feedback's really critical. It also gives us a sense of belonging. So when people give us feedback, they are instantly showing that they care about our performance. What we do matters. If we're in an environment where there's a vacuum, where no feedback is happening, then why would I consider, or why would I have a sense of belonging? Because what I'm doing doesn't matter, because nobody seems to care about the outputs that I produce. So again, if we are not giving people feedback, then it doesn't create the sense of belonging. When people get regular feedback, effective feedback that focuses on how they're contributing, good or bad, but how they're contributing to the team, it gives a sense of belonging. It increases innovation. So when we are in an environment of safety, and we'll talk about safety in a second, when we're in an environment of safety and we know that our leaders will give us feedback when we make mistakes, but that feedback will be designed to help us to grow, we will be encouraged to take more risks. But if we either don't get feedback, or the feedback we get delivered is delivered in a critical, ineffective way, then it will limit our ability to take risks. We will retreat within ourselves and go to our core to protect ourselves. So by having great levels of feedback, we increase innovation, we increase risk-taking, and people will push on to the limits of their capability and try new things, knowing that actually they'll get some feedback which will help them to understand whether they're on track or off track. Feedback increases happiness and growth for both parties. Without feedback, we can't grow, because we never know how good we are. You can't go into some activity and know how well you've done that activity unless you've got some way of measuring the output of it, some feedback that tells us whether we've done a good job or a bad job. And therefore, we can't grow. And it also increases happiness. So one of the things that's come out, some recent neuroscience came out that showed that people are at their happiest when they are striving to overcome something that's difficult. So when something comes too easy, it doesn't drive high levels of happiness and satisfaction. But when we've had to fight over obstacles and hurdles, and maybe we've had some difficult feedback that's enabled us to then challenge ourselves to do better, that's when satisfaction and happiness comes. When we've taken that message and we've managed to convert our behaviors to become much more adept, and we've grown, that's where our real satisfaction comes. That's where happiness comes from. So by being given feedback, it enables us to be happier as individuals, but it also helps you be happier as a manager. Because when you know that you've helped somebody grow and you can see them flourish on the back of your feedback, there is nothing more satisfying. And the better your team are, the better their capability grows, the better you'll be performing as a manager or leader, and actually the better harmony you'll have in your own life. And feedback helps us prevent us from being stuck or discouraged. So often we find that we get to a certain point, and it's very common for people to go on a growth trajectory and then plateau, to reach this point where they plateau and they get stuck in a certain way of being. And feedback is the thing we need to kick us out of that rut we might have fallen into, or take us on from that plateau to the next level. So it helps us stop us being stuck, and it can challenge some of our mental frameworks and our mental models to enable us to be better. So we need to create a consistent and open loop of feedback. Just like an airplane operating on autopilot, we've got a program of where we start, and we've got a program of where we want to get to in terms of performance. And all the way along that trajectory from where we are now to where we need to be, we need feedback to let us know whether we're on track or off track. The more consistent, regular feedback you can provide to your team about when they're on track or off track, the better their performance will be, and the better your performance will be. So coming back to our previous slide, the reflection of you and your management will be shown through the quality of your team. And feedback is one of the critical tools that we need to master to enable us to get the best out of our teams. We do spend too much time worrying about feedback being positive or critical. Feedback needs to simply be clear and helpful. The feedback that we give to people just needs to be effective in terms of helping them to improve and get better. So don't get too hung up on the balance between praise and criticism. There is lots of evidence that says greater praise in teams increases performance. But we just need to focus on being given critical feedback. If somebody needs to know something, good or bad, we should be telling them. We should be looking out for the positives, but we also should be looking out for the things that aren't quite right and helping them to sort that out. It's part of our obligation as a leader. So if we lay this on top of our previous slide where we were talking about the jigsaw puzzle and not having that clear picture, if you really think about this, if we aren't giving feedback, if we're operating within a vacuum of feedback, not only are we asking our teams to produce a jigsaw puzzle without any picture to follow, but we're also saying that we're going to blindfold you so you can't see what's already been done. So that's the end result of when we don't give clarity to our teams and we then don't give them effective feedback. We're actually asking them to complete a jigsaw puzzle without any guidance and without them being able to see what they've already done to know whether it was good or bad. And we both, or we all know, that that's going to lead to a very long time for that jigsaw puzzle to ever get solved, and we're probably going to never see that picture come to light. So just think about that in terms of your own a role as a leader in your own team. How well are you helping your team to complete that jigsaw puzzle? So we covered this slide last week, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but I just want to come back to it because it really is important for us to remember. So what does safety mean in the context of helping our teams to become brilliant and creating brilliance in our teams? We have to demonstrate that we trust them. We have to show that we've got their best interests at heart. They need to know that we've got their back, that we will protect them from those outside forces, those dangers that exist. They also need to know, however, that when things aren't going well, we will give them the straight, honest conversation, the feedback that we've just been talking about. And we'll give that when things are right. We'll also give things when things are wrong. But they need to know that we will help them to understand when they are on track or off track, when they are within the circle of safety and when they're stepping outside that circle. They need to know that we're here to help them get better and we want them to do well. They need to know that our genuine intentions for them to improve and grow as individuals. They need to know that we care about them and their well-being, that we believe in them, and that when we challenge them, we do so from a position of wanting them to grow and not to catch them out. So as you reflect on your team, how confident would you be of those 8 statements that I just made? Would you be totally confident that your team know you trust them, know you have their best interests at heart, know that you will protect them from outside forces, that you've got their back, that you'll give them clear feedback, both good and bad, when it's needed, that you're here to help them get better and you want them to do well, that you care about them as individuals and human beings and their well-being, that you believe in them and you have faith in their capability and their potential, and that when you challenge them, you do it from a position of wanting to help them grow and develop rather than from being punitive or trying to be destructive. Do your team know that you are trying to build them up rather than knock them down? So critical questions for us to be asking ourselves as we go away from tonight's webinar. And our final step in terms of creating brilliance is when we start to challenge and push our teams to stretch and grow, when we take them outside their comfort zone. So a big part of what we've talked about so far is how they're performing within the role that they're currently doing. But if we really want to get our diamonds to be shining brightly, we have to take them into a place where we really bring out the radiance and we stretch them and help them to grow into this place of really showing all that they're capable of. Take them outside their comfort zone, challenging them to be more, challenging them to shine more brightly. Too often we only develop people for the role that they're in now, not necessarily helping them within their careers. So a big part of our role as a leader is to be the mentor for our team, to use our skills, knowledge, and capability and our experiences to help them grow into the career that they want to pursue and to follow. and to know that after working with us, they are going to be infinitely better because of the experience that we will have and the amount of time and effort that we will invest in them and the value that we will add. So our role as a leader and manager is not just to shape them in the role that they are now, but to really shape them for the future. And again, how much time are we spending, A, understanding what their own aspirations are, B, challenge them to think more of themselves, to increase their esteem, to consider themselves as having potential to go on and above and beyond where they currently are, and to step forward out of the comfort zone into that position of stretch that enables them to increase their capability, fulfill their potential, shine more brightly in terms of the diamonds that we have within our team. So within this creating brilliance methodology that we're talking about, this ability to stretch them, to challenge them to be more, to get them to grow as human beings, and to not accept them staying within their comfort zone is a really critical part of our role as a leader and manager. Now, we can give great feedback and we can give great expectations, but if that's all we do, we're never going to fully appreciate the radiance that we have within these individuals. And the best leaders, as a common phrase is, leaders grow future leaders. The best leaders are the ones that not just grow followers, but they grow future leaders. And that's our challenge. That's our challenge as leaders, is to create other people from within our teams who can go on and lead in their own right, knowing that we have given them and invested in them lots and lots of skills to enable them to go on and become a brilliant leader in their own right. So again, as we go away from tonight's webinar, just think into, who am I growing to be a future leader? Am I just developing my teams for now to help me do my job better? Or am I investing time and energy in my mentorship and my experience to enable them to grow as an individual and add value to them, so that they leave, at whatever point they leave my team, bigger, better, more adept, more capable, and hopefully ready to go on and lead teams of their own with a really good basis for that growth. So that brings us to the end of tonight's lesson. As always, if you've got any questions on tonight's content, then please do use the chat function. I'll come and have a look at those questions towards the end of the webinar. But before we go into that, I'm just going to quickly have a look at some of the questions that came in advance of tonight's webinar. So the first question we had come in this week, which is a great question, is I have a team member I want to help with career progression. So bang in line with what we've been talking about as part of the webinar that we've just gone through in the lesson from tonight. I can help them by involving them in projects with other teams, but what if they don't have any of these going on? So if you've got a member of a team who has got some aspirations to move to a different part of the function because they want to progress and grow, and we can try and involve them in what's going on, but often those opportunities don't always exist, or those opportunities can be difficult. And whilst we can go around introducing them and raising their profile, what other ways can we help to develop and to help keep them motivated? Well, the first thing is, I would just take you back to making sure that the individuals who you've got within your team currently understand, and you help them to create the clear mental picture of what brilliant looks like. So whatever level of performance they're at currently, let them know that brilliance looks like something, and the first step for them to grow in their career is to become brilliant. So paint the picture of where they can take themselves to be even better at what they're currently doing, to prepare themselves for the next step. So first part of it would be absolutely getting them to understand that if they're not currently at that brilliant status, if they're not a radiant diamond, what would it look like if they became a radiant diamond in the role that they're currently doing? So that's one thing that we can look at. And just by getting that feedback from you to help them to understand where they can improve even further, we'll start to create that platform for motivation, and will kick in their inner drive to go on. But of course, that's not going to satisfy them in the long run. So when it comes to their own career progression, what I would recommend you looking at is based on where they see themselves going, what their ambitions are for themselves. And it's really great to have that conversation of where do you see yourself, what is your aspiration, where do you see yourself going, and spend time just talking to them about them, not about specific roles within the organization, not even about your organization itself, but where do they see themselves, what's their ambition. Now, having that conversation gives you two things. It will show the person that you really care about them, not just within the role they're doing or how they can help your team, but actually you care about them as an individual. And secondly, it will give you insight into where their ambitions lie and maybe where the gaps are in terms of what their current performance is. Once you've got an idea of what their ambitions are, help them to create a mental model of who is the person they need to become to be able to fulfill that ambition. So a big challenge for us when we're growing our teams is for us to help them to understand that for them to achieve a position, they need to become the person worthy of that position. So if they want to take on a more senior role, what are the attributes, what are the talents, what are the skills, what are the behaviors that more senior role is going to need, and help them to really understand that and put in place a development program that says, I'm going to help you to become the person you need to be to qualify for the roles that you want to do. And by going through that process of development to become, they then position themselves when the opportunities come up for projects to be worked on or for vacancies that come within the teams that they may want to move towards. They position themselves much more strongly to be successful in that next stage than waiting for the position and then doing the growth that comes with it. So having a conversation that really paints a picture, again, gives you that clear jigsaw puzzle, the outer cover of the box, that jigsaw puzzle, we paint the picture of what we're trying to create, and we make sure that they know they've got all of the pieces to put that puzzle together. And we're going to help them with putting those pieces into the right order to enable them to become the picture of the person they will need to be to step onto that next level. So whilst the opportunity may not exist now, what we can do is invest time and energy and potentially create space within their diary currently to help them to develop onto the next level. So it may be that we create, you've heard me talk before about the 10% club of allowing 10% of your own time and energy and money to be invested in growing your relevance for the future. Well, we can do the same with our teams, is to allow them a certain amount of time each week or each month that they can invest in becoming this other person rather than just doing the job that they're doing now. And that becoming can be achieved through maybe training courses that they need to go and attend. It may be reading that they may need to do. It may be mentoring and finding them a mentor in the business. It may just be spending time with you where you start to coach them and develop in their thinking to change to become the person that they want to be. It may be that you share some of this content with them to help them to think into how do I need to become a leader. But spending time just helping them to become the person that they'll need to become in order to achieve the things they want to achieve. The becoming should always come first. If we can become the person, the achievement will naturally follow. So really focusing on that becoming. We hear a lot about goals. One of the things around setting goals is not necessarily the achievement of the goal, but it's becoming the person capable of achieving the goal that really matters. And it's exactly the same with your team members, helping them to become the person who's capable of stepping up. So when the opportunity comes around, they can make that step really easily. So hopefully that's given you a few ideas of how you may be able to go and work with this individual to keep them motivated, to put a development plan in place that is focused on this becoming. So again, if you got any more questions on that, then please use the chat and I'll come back to those and retune in a second. So hopefully that's helped with some ideas on that question, but great question. Really important point in our role as a mentor leader. So our next question is, if you do not have a relationship with your manager, how can you broach any topic with them, especially if it's important to a team? So this is a real challenge. If your relationship with your own manager isn't great, our ability to manage up is really, really important. So my first, I guess, point would be we should be striving to form some kind of relationship with our manager. Finding a way to create some kind of connection with them that enables us at least to have a functional relationship. We don't need to be their best friend. We don't need to monopolize their time and energy. But we do need to try and create a functional relationship, which means we can raise the points that need to be raised. So that would be my first thing, is how can I find ways to spend time with that manager to enable that to happen? And that may be you needing to step outside your comfort zone and request time with them and be more demanding of them for some time, but explaining why you need it. What is it that you want to get from the time that you want with them? So that would be my first part, is try and work on that relationship if you can. When it comes to raising things with people, particularly if they're important things, one of the things I would encourage you to think about is, rather than raising issues and stating those issues directly, think about the questions you can ask that will lead to the raising of the issue itself. So rather than going and saying, we have an issue in the team and I want to share it with you, asking them the questions that prompt them to discover the issue, it can be a really powerful way of getting people who are not connected to what you're trying to do, and maybe not showing any interest in what you're trying to do, to increase their level of interest. Because rather than coming to them with issues and problems, if you come to them with really cleverly, powerful questions that are cleverly designed and cleverly thought through, you can normally elicit some kind of interest or discovery of the issue that's prompting the question in the first place. So I would encourage you to think about, what are the questions you could ask of that manager, whether that's done verbally, face-to-face, which would be ideal, or if your communication is only via electronic mediums, email or messenger, then how can I ask the question in a way that's going to elicit discovery and raise the issue to the surface via an email that you might send to them. So those would be my two kind of approaches for this. Try and build a relationship. And whilst we say that it's the leader's responsibility to always go first, it doesn't always mean that more senior people in the organization are the leaders. And sometimes we have to take that leadership role that says, I'm not getting it from them, so I'm going to step into that place and I'm going to actively pursue creating a relationship with them, even if I don't particularly like them, because it will be the right thing for me to do as a team. Leadership is often about doing the right thing, not the easy thing. So sometimes we might have to step in, create that relationship, be more demanding of wanting a relationship with that person to enable you to then tackle some of the issues. And my second tip is around using questioning as a technique to elicit discovery of the issues and raising the topic or the subject with them through questioning rather than through statement. If we are seen to be somebody who is only ever bringing issues to them because we don't have a relationship, and the only time we ever talk to them is because we've got an issue, potentially their defenses will go up straight away. Whereas asking a really great question that doesn't imply that they're at fault will enable you to perhaps get a conversation without the defenses going up. So that's what I would encourage you to maybe look at and try. Again, if there's any more that you want from that on the chat function, then please do add. And then our final question that came through this week is, how do you change the culture of communication in your team where over-communication with no clear agenda or target setting is the norm? So again, lots of teams do this where they spend time discussing things, probably go around the loop many times, have lots and lots of verbose discussions about things, but nothing ever gets agreed and no action seems to be taken. And nothing seems to happen on the back of those conversations. And that can be massively frustrating for some people in the team who want to go on and make progress or want to do things. So within this, what I would again encourage you to do is when you go into any formal meetings or sessions where you are communicating it as a team, maybe in advance to say, to be asking the question is, what are we trying to achieve through this meeting? What's the goal or the objective of the meeting? So maybe to start preempting the conversation by asking that question in advance. And then when you're in a communication or a cultural communication where there's lots and lots of talking going on, again, we may need to take that leadership role. It may not be that we're the leader of this team. We may be just part of this team, but we might need to take that leadership role that says, at each of the kind of key junctures within the communication, what are we agreeing here? What is the actual action that's going to happen on the back of this discussion we've just had? What are the outputs that we're getting from that conversation? And choosing the key junctures in the conversation or the meeting, whatever the forum is, to then just stop, pause, and just say, okay, just before we move on to the next point, what's our agreement? What are we doing about this? And who's going to own it? And really start to influence those around you to know that when you're communicating and you're involved in that communication, then you are going to be the one who's going to be challenging the group to say, what is our next step? What are we going to do? What's the action that we're agreeing on the back of this? Again, that may not feel comfortable, but sometimes as leaders, we have to step outside our comfort zone and take that step. Because if we don't, who is going to? It may be, and again, depending on the team and depending on the environment that you're in, it may be that you call a discussion to just discuss how do we communicate as a team, and maybe to share some of the frustrations. Because it may be that you've got some frustrations, but so do other members of the team. And those commonality of frustrations, if they're brought to the fore, may make the whole team understand that actually you're not being as effective as you could be. So those are my kind of 3 things that I would look at doing. Can you preempt the communication opportunities that exist within the team by saying, what is the objective of the meeting, the discussion, the getting together, whatever the forum is? So preempt by saying there needs to be some purpose behind this. If you are in a conversation that seems to be going round and round in circles, to call a pause at a natural time to just say, okay, that's been a really good discussion. What are our agreements on this? What have we agreed what we're going to do? Just so I can be clear, and you can own it for yourself in terms of labeling it to the team, but just so I can be clear, what do we need to do with this information now? What are we agreeing that's going to happen? And don't move on to the next point until you're clear in terms of that. And again, it's a great way for you to own that and say, okay, so I'm really clear. What does this mean? And that will drive the communication towards doing that. And then the third part that I would encourage you to do is potentially to then flag your concerns and maybe see if other people have got the same concerns. Are they having the same frustrations you're having? And maybe to raise a question for the team which just says, how well do we think we're communicating? What could we do better as a team to become more effective moving forward? And again, that may be you needing to trigger that with the team. It may be that if you've got a good relationship with the line manager, it may be that you go to the line manager and say, well, actually, I've got some frustrations around this. Is that something that we should be raising as a team? And they may want to then take that and raise it. So it depends on the makeup of the team and how you feel within it. So maybe to go to your line manager and discuss it, or just to step into that leadership space yourself, even though you may not be the manager of that team, to then ask the question around that. So hopefully those 3 tips may help with how to go about addressing some of that. So I'm just going to go and check out on the chat and see if there's any other comments or thoughts that have come in. So it's just a comment there about ashes can be turned into diamonds with pressure. Absolutely. So carbon, we know that diamonds are formed out of carbon over millions of years of pressure, and that's what creates those beautiful diamonds. So again, yes, the ashes of things, particularly when just riffing on that for a little bit, but when we've got somebody who's maybe been burnt in a previous job and they may come to us with some frailties, we can create a diamond out of some of those frailties, that pressure that they've had in the previous job. If they are well maintained and well nurtured, we can create those radiant diamonds even if they didn't come to us. in that shape in the first place. So yeah, really nice point about ashes turning into diamonds over time with pressure. And it's a great, glad you agree, and from your own experiences too, which is great. So yeah, seeing how people can blossom in certain environments and not in others, depending on how well they're nurtured by the leaders who look after them. So are there any final questions on any of the content that we covered in the last 55 minutes or so? Hopefully those questions were great, really great questions. So thank you very much for those questions that have come across, really great. And please do keep those coming on our future webinars. Hopefully you've learned a lot from the other questions that were asked by others on the webinar, as well as your own questions. And hopefully our imagination or our visualization of the jigsaw puzzle without the guide, without the picture, and when we're putting a blindfold on because we're not giving people feedback, hopefully that's made you, given you a good mental image for yourself to think about how you can contribute better. We need to be giving people a really clear picture of what that jigsaw puzzle looks like, and we need to remove the blindfolds and remove the gloves so they can have complete feedback on where they're placing those puzzle pieces to enable them to get to the answer and become the diamonds that we want them to become. So thank you very much for your time. And again, I will be sending out the recording as always, and I look forward to joining you on our next session where we will continue to explore how we become really effective as leaders and look into how we advance and face into some of the challenges that leadership brings. So I encourage you to take an action from tonight, go away, apply it back into your own work practice, and keep advancing, keep developing, keep pushing yourself outside your comfort zone, keep trying new things, because that's the way that we will grow as leaders. So thank you all for your time this evening. Really look forward to joining you next week on our next webinar. Have a wonderful week, and I will speak to you all again very soon. Thanks very much. Okay, great. So I'm going to call into webinar there. It's fine if you're going to be away. Absolutely, you'll get the videos. So hopefully you'll enjoy those videos as well. So great stuff, guys. Really appreciate it, and I'll speak to you all soon.